character brought into the show. We had the end of the farm, the end of the barn, what looks like the end of the RV, and the beginning of the dictatorship. So it was quite the episode.
It really was. And once again, we have a lot to go over for this episode itself. We've been kind of stockpiling the emails and voicemails and things like that. We're going to take care of all that stuff in our season 2 wrap-up show, which will be next. We'll have plenty of time to talk about all that stuff for, 9 months or so, roughly?
No, it's going to be a much shorter off-season this time than it was last year. It'll be 6 or 7.
If it's Halloween, it'll be about 6 or 7 months.
Not bad. We can handle it.
And season 3 will be 16 episodes long. So presumably the hiatus between this season is less than the one between the last 2 seasons. Presumably the hiatus next year will be even shorter.
And if someone were pining away for Walking Dead material, John, say they wanted to get a graphic novel or a compendium or some sort of Walking Dead in the off-season, where would be the discounted place to do that?
I would think the best place, Jim, would be dcbservice.com. DCBS is our wonderful sponsor. They have ginormous discounts on all things comic book. You can get your monthly issues, your trade paperbacks, your hardcovers, your comic, TV, movie-related t-shirts, and all sorts of paraphernalia, shot glasses, and cigarette lighters, anything you can think of. DCBservice.com. Some of the specials this month. The whole second wave of DC #1 books is 50% off if you buy them in a bundle. So if you grab all 6 of those new #1 issues, you get them at half off. New trade paperbacks and hardcovers from Image Comics are 40 to 50% off. And guess what? The Walking Dead is from Image Comics. So that means the latest trade paperback, volume 15, would be 45 to 50% off. You can also catch up on any of the other Walking Dead trade volumes. They resolicit them every month. So if you want to start from scratch with volume 1, that one is $5.99, which is an unbelievable bargain. It can get you started on some good zombie reading for the off-season. We understand that next month, by the beginning of April, you will be able to buy the Compendium Volume 2. Now, this 50% off offer will probably be gone by the time that the Compendium Volume 2 is out, but you can always add the code WD8 to get an extra 8% off whatever they are offering for the month. And that's going to be at least 40% off. So you're looking at 48% off. If you're a new customer at DCB Service or you haven't ordered anything in a year, you can add that code in and get some great discounts. So please check out dcbservice.com. We always thank them for their sponsorship. Jordan, we have some news, I think, that we need to get to before we actually get into the latest episode, don't we?
Yeah, there's a bunch of news. First off, just came out today was a new trailer for the Walking Dead video game, as well as an interview with, I forget his exact title, but he's the guy who's kind of coordinating the story between the 5 chapters because it's going to be an episodic release, and he's also the writer of the 5th chapter. And you can find the links to both of those at the Walking Dead TV podcast Facebook page, or also on YouTube, but we prefer you go through our page, of course, and post about it. And it was a very cool trailer in the style of the comic book, and the interview was pretty informative as well. So that was pretty cool. But also, beside just that, there was also the ratings news for this episode. And you guys, of course, if you're listening to the show or just paying attention to Walking Dead in general, you know that the Walking Dead has been setting cable ratings records since the beginning. In fact, the season 2 premiere set a rating. I believe when season 2 came back after the hiatus, it set another big record in the ratings, but they have topped it yet again for the season 2 finale. The most watched cable program in history was last night's season finale with, let me just get my numbers right here exactly, 9 million viewers. So that was absolutely spectacular. Like I said, biggest episode of Walking Dead, biggest episode of anything ever on AMC, biggest episode of anything ever on at least basic cable. So congrats to those guys, because that is awesome.
Am I correct? I think I read that it's up 50% from the season 1 finale?
That sounds about right. And even that was setting records back then. So yeah, and it's the #1 drama in basic cable history with men 18 to 34 is that one I got here. And that's the category the demographics are always looking for, because those are the people who are spending the most money. And so that's the ones that the advertisers want to see the show hitting. So this is absolutely fantastic news.
And I have to say, this was a great jump-on show. Like, even though it was a finale and you might have had some questions about some of the conversation that went on, you could jump into this one and just see tons of zombie killing and blood, gore, and all sorts of tension and everything. This would be a great one to jump on. And I'm sure a lot of people did. I'm sure a lot of people will be hunting out those DVD sets and, everything else from here on out.
My mother's sister, my aunt Phyllis, jumped into The Walking Dead with the episode, I guess it was episode 7, where they finally found Sophia. And that was her very first episode of The Walking Dead to watch, and she was just hooked from that point. So there's been a couple of those episodes where you can just watch it and say, holy crap, I need to keep watching.
For anybody who understands how ratings work, this episode got a 5.8 rating, and essentially what that means is, of all the people, and this is of course estimated using Nielsen boxes and all that kind of stuff, but it's estimated that out of every 100 people in the US with a television turned on at the hour The Walking Dead was on, approximately 6 people were watching. So 6% of the entire population in the US that had a television on was watching the show.
I didn't want to interrupt you when you're talking about the ratings, Jordan, but if I could take a step back for just a second, the Telltale Games episodic Walking Dead video game is coming out. I do recommend, as you did, to go check out the trailer, because it has a very striking visual style. It's almost like, it's not quite cell shaded, but definitely like comic shaded. It definitely has a graphic novel feel to the graphics, and I really think they're going to come out something very interesting, very true to the Spirit of the Walking Dead story.
It reminded me of, do you guys remember that fan-made opening credits that came out before season 1 debuted? That was in the style of the comics. Do you guys remember that?
No, I don't think I do.
I don't either.
It was an animated, it was like 90 seconds long, using, I believe, panels from the comic, but like animated and with cool music. This felt amazing like that, only in color. It was really cool. So if you guys haven't checked it out, go to the Walking Dead TV Facebook page, just search for it on Walking Dead TV on Facebook, and check out those links, because it's really cool looking. And the interview was fun too.
Hey, I got something. What about this past weekend at WonderCon? Michael Rooker was there, and he confirmed that Merle will be back for season 3.
Yeah, he said he's lost 20 pounds for the role. So to me, that does not sound like he's just going to be showing up in a dream or a flashback. This sounds like he's coming back in a major way.
Wow.
I would like to go on record as making a prediction, if I may, that Merle will return as the governor's right-hand man.
Well, certainly not his left hand.
Pun intended.
And last night on the Talking Dead season finale, someone called in and asked, or wrote in and asked Robert Kirkman, will Dwayne Morgan or Merle Dwayne Morgan, of course, the father and son from the pilot, will any of them be showing in season 3? And he said 100%, 33% of them will be back for sure. So that sounds like Merle, especially with this news.
Agreed.
So are we ready to get on to the recap?
Yeah, let's get on with the recap.
All right. Episode 213, the season 2 finale, starts before the last episode ends, well before actually. We start in Atlanta, and at first you can't really even tell if it's before or after the zombie-apocalypse, but then you pan down, you see quite a few zombies eating what could have been Rick's horse, or could have just been something else. I wasn't entirely sure.
Look like a dog to me.
Can I ask you guys a question? The very first shot in that was a helicopter going overhead.
Yes, sir.
That was kind of the zombies following that along. Was that the same helicopter we saw in season 1?
I believe Kirkman said it certainly would make sense to believe they're at least the same one or a similar one. I don't think it matters if they're the same exact one, but it would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think they focused on that helicopter for that reason.
And yeah, like Jim said, we see the zombies and we hear the helicopter which goes by, which means that presumably Rick was at least not hallucinating. There was a helicopter in the area, and the zombies see that, and at first they're not doing anything, but as soon as they see it and hear it, they start traveling in that direction. And as has been true in zombie war for a long time, once you get zombies going in a certain direction, if they don't have anything to distract them, they will just keep going in that way. And in these herds of zombies, as has been explained to us in the comics and in the show a little bit, once it's kind of like a flock mentality. Once you get a certain number, any zombie in the area that sees them or that kind of gets in their way will they'll just get right in lockstep and keep going until you have this giant. I mean, by the end, how many zombies would you say were in this? I mean, hundreds. It looked like by the end of it, just all coming from the same direction. And they go through the woods, they go through fields, and by the time I think it was a 2-minute or so scene, by the time we see them at night, they hear a gunshot right off to the side. They come out of the woods, and there is Rick, Shane, or Dead Shane, and Carl. So this takes us right up to where last episode ended.
There's a really cool shot of in that montage of all the walkers making their way towards the farm. It's the one where in the distance. Okay, let me start. In the foreground, there's a group of zombies that are walking towards a fence, and then the zombies pile up against the fence till the fence breaks. But at the beginning of that shot, as the camera's panned up, you can see on either side of the shot of the screen 2 separate groups of zombies coming from the left, one from the left side, one from the right side. So it's like 2 smaller herds meeting and joining and creating the bigger herd. And I thought that was neat. That it's not just the one group of zombies that we've been following from downtown. There was another group of zombies that apparently came from somewhere else that have done what Jordan said. They kind of meet, and start hanging out together to make even a bigger group. I thought that was a really neat shot.
I love the scene where they all got herded up against that fence and the fence collapsed. Like, I thought that was cool. So I do want to say that because I don't want this to sound like a complaint. And it's more of a question anyway. Was their actions, did it match up with like some of the earlier shows? Like I think it was Guts where they run up against like a chain link fence when they're chasing Glenn and Rick. And I seem to remember them like trying to climb up the fence or like shaking it. Like they seemed more proactive to get past an obstacle. And then in this one, they were just kind of like running up against the fence because they couldn't, manipulate anything.
Well, I mean, I'd say the context in the context of Guts, they were actively pursuing a target that was right there. Whereas in this one, they were just kind of wandering in a certain direction. They weren't seeing a target right there in front of them.
Oh, okay.
To get to.
Yeah, I can live with that.
My guess.
But they were definitely moving differently, right? Like I think it was Guts where, like you said, they were pretty actively pursuing. They might have climbed a fence, or what did they do? Climb a fire escape, maybe?
I think 2 of them got over before it just kind of fell down.
Right.
Because the others were just kind of pushing like these ones were.
Gotcha.
I think Jordan's right though. I think it's you can walk until you see that $100 bill laying on the ground, then you're running towards that $100 bill. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can live with that.
And I think this was an important scene for all the people complaining after last week. They've been firing guns for how long? And this is the first time all these zombies come through. Well, as we saw in the episode, the zombies weren't there until this particular moment. It just happened to be really rotten luck for Rick and Carl and everybody, quite frankly, that they happened to be there at this particular moment when the gunshot went off.
There's also a couple of zombies that while you're watching from the beginning, you can see a couple of the same zombies in like these different shots. Like there's one doctor dressed in scrubs and a white coat. He's in a couple of the different shots, which is pretty cool to be able to follow him. It's like he's been going the whole time.
Yeah, and it gives a good sense of continuity for that this is definitely the same group and they're not just showing you shots of random zombies marching across the land.
But no Buster in that group, at least none that I noticed.
You know what? I really was looking hard for Buster, and he should have been a featured zombie if he was even there. So, I think they dropped the ball on that. That really could have really sold the idea that these zombies actually were in downtown and they made it all the way out here. I think that was a missed opportunity, but it was still very well done, the whole montage they did.
Definitely. So when that scene is over, we of course catch up right with Carl and Rick, and Carl wants to know what happened, Dad, what happened with Shane, how'd he die? And at that particular moment is when they first hear the groans coming behind them, and Rick freaks out and they start running for the farm in general, but they can't even get to the farm, so they actually head to the barn first because there's so many zombies coming in at that point from almost every direction. Like this group is just pretty much surrounded the farm.
One of the questions we had amongst ourselves last episode was something about, did Carl see them? Did Carl hear something? And we had said, a lot of these questions we're asking are probably going to be answered in the first couple of minutes. Well, here's one example. Carl says, I heard a gunshot. So, that's why he headed off in that direction. It's because he heard the gunshot.
And I got the impression that the reason he had been, because a couple of people point out, he was pointing that gun at Rick before Shane got up. He seemed to intimate in his conversation with Rick that he thought Rick had been bitten at that point.
Right.
That was interesting.
Yeah, and so he was just trying to protect himself. I don't remember what I said about the situation last week. I don't think I really voiced an opinion, and if I did, I've already forgotten it. But I never got the feeling that he raised his gun because he saw Shane moving. I think he just wasn't sure about his dad, and he was trying to protect himself.
And joining our festivities now is our 5th member, thank goodness, Russell Latham. Russ.
Howdy, guys.
I didn't invite you in.
Is that a shiny new mic you have, Russell?
Unfortunately, not. No, I did not get home in time to hook all that up.
Oh well, you sound good anyway.
One other issue that we had last time that was kind of addressed by this is how far they were in relation to the house when all that went down. And it seems like they're a lot closer to the barn than they were to the house than we might have thought of. I know we talked about that last
Right.
episode because they would immediately go to the barn for shelter to get away from the herd.
At this point in the episode, we then jump back a little bit even further, I think, back in time, not quite as back as far as when we first see the zombies, but Daryl and Glenn get back to the farmhouse, and Daryl lays out for everybody that Shane wasn't on the up and up. Something was going on here. We found Randall. He wasn't bitten, but he was a zombie. His neck had been snapped, and it looked like Shane's tracks were right on top of his, so something's going on out there. And either they hear the gunshot first, and then Lori comes down and says that she realizes Carl is not in bed where she thought he was, or vice versa. But both things happen very quickly. They see that there's a whole big group of zombies outside, and then everything gets very chaotic from that point forward for like the next half an hour, 40 minutes of the episode.
There's Lori being parent to the year again. Where's your son?
Yeah, I told him to stay in his room. I can't imagine where he would be now.
It's not like he's nine or something.
Please see the cartoon that I posted on our Facebook group this week about Carl.
This also answers another question we had was, where exactly was Carl? Was he upstairs in the house? Was he in the barn looking out? And we learned that he was actually upstairs looking out of the bedroom window or something.
So like I said before, everything kind of goes chaotic at that point. So we're going to touch on specific moments, but not really follow the plot for this chunk of the episode. Rick and Carl go into the barn. They bar off the doors so the zombies can't get in, and then they lay down a track of gasoline. Carl goes up into the rafters. Rick lets the zombies in and then climbs up the ladder real quick while Carl drops a lighter onto the gasoline, setting the zombies and the barn on fire.
Just real quick, I thought we were going to get like the typical John Woo slow motion lighter falling on the ground, and then slowly we see like the gasoline ignite. So I was actually kind of thankful that they didn't go with the cliched route.
I love the shot of Rick opening the barn doors and he's yelling, come on, come on.
Yeah,
and the camera's right behind him and it trucks back as he's walking backwards and this horde of zombies just walks in. I thought that was beautiful.
At some point right here, this is when they see the barn, the other group sees the barn is on fire. So Jimmy takes the RV and he brings it to right next to the barn, and everyone else is kind of getting in cars and on motorcycles, driving around and shooting the zombies like some crazy futuristic showdown at the OK Corral. They're just shooting everything in sight and hitting everything in the head. It was quite amazing.
That kind of came off as like futile or a waste of time. Like just
Well,
drive.
ammunition is what I was thinking. I mean, why are they wasting all this ammunition trying to thin this herd when they're going to abandon the farm anyway?
Well,
the only one I thought was justified was Herschel, because he's like, I'm going to stay and defend my farm to the end. That was his first reaction. He's like, this is my farm. I'm not leaving.
I don't think they realized how many zombies there were.
Right. The whole herd. I'm looking at the scene right now, and it's real quick cuts and stuff. The whole herd has not arrived. I mean, they're still pouring out into the main open field from behind the barn. It's like Herschel even says they keep coming. It's not stopping. They keep coming. They had no idea how many was there, and so they're not going to sit there and wait and go, let's hold on to our ammunition until we get a better idea of how many zombies are out here. You're going to start popping zombies as soon as you know that they're there.
And I think too that maybe they were just trying to disrupt the herd. They're all in one group, all central, And if they come in and they all come from different angles and they start shooting and they get some of them to follow one set and some to follow the other, some to follow the other, it'll break them up enough that they could find those that are missing, gather them up, and get the hell out of there.
And didn't somebody say at one point that their plan was to shoot as many as they could, but then hopefully get them to follow the cars off the property?
Yeah.
Like they were hoping to lead what looked like at first maybe 50 to 100 zombies off the property. Then it turned out there was like 3, 4, 500 of them by the end. So Jimmy takes the RV over to the barn. I guess they figure that Rick set the fire, so they send Jimmy over there with the RV. He gets waved down by Rick and Carl, who are standing on the top of the burning barn. Not the best place to be, but in this particular situation, also not the worst. And so he pulls up right alongside the barn, and they jump on the roof. And then it was a little unclear what Jimmy was thinking, because either he went to secure the side door, or he saw the side door getting busted in, but he jumps out of the driver's seat, and at that moment the zombies bust into the side door, and they rip him apart. So bye Jimmy. Rick and Carl climb down the back of the RV, and they pretty much use like a ladder, and then they run to a little bit more safety. And I thought it was interesting in The Talking Dead, they pointed out that because it was 27 degrees that night, they had to digitally remove the steam around all the zombies' mouths because zombies don't breathe, so they had to remove that. But they use this particular scene as that reference.
Yeah, and according to The Talking Dead, that Winnebago is the same make and model that was used in Spaceballs.
Which is pretty funny.
Yeah, this last night was the first time I'd ever watched The Walking Dead. The Talking Dead, I mean, and it was interesting. You know what, though? I'm not sure that's accurate about the zombies not breathing, because sound from a human being is made by air blowing across the vocal cords. Okay, that's breathing.
Well, they grunt, but they don't have to breathe to stay alive, so it's not going to be a consistent smoke or steam cloud. You know what I mean? It could happen every once in a while, but it's not going to be a consistent thing.
Okay.
They might have some breath, but they wouldn't have steam coming off their bodies.
I guarantee you, if they had the smoke from the breath coming off like that, and heat off the body, dude, like geeks would go bananas.
You're probably right.
It would be on every site, and it'd be, the Twitterverse would explode over something like that.
You're probably right.
I did like when the zombies got the best of Jimmy, though. It was basically, Carl and Rick were like Jimmy, and they look, and they're just like a spatter of blood on the windshield.
Yeah, that was really effective.
And they're like, okay.
I guess Jimmy's done.
All right, I want to point out how badass Herschel is.
I was just about to get to
in
that.
this
How
scene.
awesome was that?
Now, my dad's a hunter. My brother's a hunter. So by osmosis, I know a little bit about guns, shotguns. The gun Herschel was using, a shotgun, I counted how many shells, because it looked like he never reloaded. Like that thing had infinite.
Until right at the
I
end.
mentioned that to my wife when we watched it. Yeah,
Right.
it was like, it's one of the oodling guns, oodles and noodles of bullets.
Yeah, so I watched that scene a couple times, and I counted. There was a couple of different times where you could hear him shoot about 10 shells, and then it would stop. You hear somebody else's gun. There was even a time when in the background, somebody was on the porch of the house or something, and in the background you could see Herschel reaching into his pocket, which were obviously deep because they carried so many damn shells, but he would reach into his pocket. You could see him reloading. Okay, but the gun he had, and I confirmed this with my dad, and he pretty much said, yeah, that really wasn't accurate. That particular shotgun didn't have an extended magazine, for lack of a better word, underneath the barrel. There's no way that particular gun would hold 10 shells. He said 7 at most, maybe 6. So it probably took a little bit of dramatic license with that. But
And of course, he ran out of, and he had to reload at the most dramatically tension-filled moments.
right. But apparently the people in charge, maybe the editor, I don't know, they went to great pains to not actually show him shooting more than 10 shells at a time. And you can watch movies and TV shows, and you'd be like, especially my dad, I hear him do a lot. He goes, that guy just shot more bullets than he really has in his gun, stuff like that. So it wasn't exactly. I'm sorry, it wasn't exactly.
I like I think it's exactly. He's exactly right.
It wasn't exactly accurate, but I'm watching now the scene with Herschel. He stops, he pauses, he reaches in, and that one zombie is walking up right behind him, the one that Rick takes out, and Herschel turns around to look, and he's got that zombie blood on the back of his head from the brains that Rick just blew out of the zombie behind him. So it does show Herschel reloading a couple of times, but suspending your disbelief on could that gun actually shoot that many times. Herschel was just a complete badass in this, and then as he's making his way back to the truck, he clocks a zombie with the butt of his gun because he doesn't have time to reload.
Yep.
He's just, I heard people say this, and I never thought I would be one of them, but Herschel really is one of the coolest characters on the show, especially ever since he saw the light, quote unquote, about really what was going on.
Right.
He's really owned up to the situation. And I'm sorry, I was just distracted by the shot of the barn burning. That was just amazing. They actually torched that barn. There was no CG in that. And also in The Talking Dead, Glenn Mazzara said one of the photographers or producer, somebody noticed that the barn was about to fall. They reset the zombie extras really quickly and shot that scene again of the zombies walking away as the barn roof collapses. He said that was a 1 in a million chance they got that shot, but they did. And that was just incredibly well done.
Yeah, I always look. You could definitely tell that was, for the most part, real. They really burned it. And the key is always smoke. Whenever you see something that's, quote, burning, a building, whatever, and there's all kinds of fire and there's no smoke, they're not really lighting that on fire. Anytime anything burns, the smoke is just, you'll see more smoke than fire.
You mean where there's smoke, there's fire?
Where there's fire, there's smoke.
And that shot of Herschel in the truck as they're driving away, where he's turning around looking out through the back, and you can just see the anguish on his face that he has to leave the farm. What's the guy's name who plays Herschel?
Something
Scott
Green?
No,
Herschel Green is.
Scott Wilson.
Scott Wilson, yeah.
He just was so good in this episode. Really, really awesome.
Well, Brad, you'll know this because you already said you watched The Talking Dead, but they mentioned that. Remember how we said 3 episodes ago that when Dale found that the dead cow was actually supposed to be a cast member? They said last night it was actually supposed to be Jimmy, but they decided they didn't want to take away from Dale's death in any way by having another death right there, so they moved that to the finale. And then also Scott Wilson, Herschel, was supposed to be clocked over the head and killed by Randall. And then Shane was going to do everything he did, but they decided that last minute they kind of want to keep Herschel alive because he really liked working with the actor, and also probably they said this is my guess because they didn't have Dale around, they wanted to keep him over character. But they said it was worth it just for that shot of him, like you said, Brad, looking at the burning farm, and just the zombies overrunning the farm, which was such a powerful shot.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
I think I mentioned in the Facebook group recently that all of a sudden, like last week, it clicked to me that Herschel reminded me of Harvey Keitel's part in Dusk Till Dawn, sort of like the father of the group, and he's a bit of a Bible thumper and a reformed man.
And now he's got an Asian son-in-law.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, so anyway, I guess my point was this episode even brought that home more now that he's like firing a shotgun at zombies and stuff.
I love that cool jacket he wears towards the end too. I don't think he wore while he was firing the gun, but when they get back to the highway, that was a cool jacket.
Yeah, it was like it was in that red pickup, like it just happened to be there.
Yeah, it was a spare suit.
And this scene of the barn coming down and everything, this is when we got like the sad music and stuff and went to commercial. Or am I thinking of another part?
No, you're right.
You're right.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Sorry.
That would have been awesome if that was the music they played.
And then you can see Bill Bixby with his coat over his shoulder walking down the side of the road. I thought it was cool. It was for me, it seemed like an inside out strategy based on Night of the Living Dead, where there are a bunch of people trapped in a farmhouse with a giant herd of zombies outside. Instead of, I thought sure after seeing the previews last week, they were going to barricade the house, board themselves in. You know what I mean? But I was really surprised when they immediately jumped into the cars and were ready to abandon ship everyone but Herschel.
Just waiting for one of the pickup trucks to get 1,000 gasoline.
Yeah.
We missed the little scene about when Andrea saves Carol's bacon. She, Carol's trapped between two zombies in a barn. All she's got is a wooden plank, and Andrea comes up, pops the two zombies, and then Carol in turn saves Andrea because she screams, and Andrea turns around and pops a zombie, and then we see the shot from inside the pickup over T-Dog's shoulder of the zombie falling on top of Andrea. So all those people saw Andrea go down. They even said that later. We saw her go down, but they have no idea if Andrea's alive or not.
Yeah, it was so hectic. I mean, I think they did a really good job in the editing room of keeping things just hectic and convoluted enough so you understood we'll get to it later, when all the characters later on, nobody knows where anybody is, they don't know who's alive, everybody has just a scrap of information, not all the information is correct, and it so conveyed that hysteria of what was going on. I thought it was great.
Yeah, the editing was fantastic in this episode. Some of the best that we've seen.
So yeah, Rick and Carl, they meet up with Herschel, and they take one truck, and like you already said, Brad, there's a shot of him looking over his shoulder. That was great. They head off to the highway. Then we had the two vehicles, the two trucks. We had, or the truck and the Hyundai. We had, it was Andrea and T-Dog driving around in the truck shooting zombies. Andrea gets out to save Carol, and Patricia gets grabbed by a zombie, and so then we have Lori, T-Dog, and Beth in the pickup truck, and they get away. Like we said, Andrea gets knocked over by the zombie, so they think she's dead, so she gets left behind. And
it
Daryl
looks like
picks
she
up
got
Carol.
a particularly big zombie fall on her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? She's like, obviously we find out later that she's not, been killed or what have you. But from what it's cool, like you were saying, the shot that you get is a tracking shot, like what they see from the pickup. They see Andrea falling under a big old zombie. So you see what they see. So you're drawing the same. You see why they draw the conclusion.
Daryl picks up Carol on his motorcycle, and they head off in another direction. And then
he goes, come on, I don't have all day.
I mean, the motorcycle would be so great in so many situations for getting through traffic jams and all that kind of stuff when you have all those cars on the highway. But man, I would not want to have to deal with turning in a small radius with a motorcycle when there's zombies right behind you, because those zombies just about got him. I mean, I know it's all showing everything, but I would not want to be in that situation of having to walk around in a circle while they're creeping up on you. Meanwhile, Glenn and Maggie are in the Hyundai, and they almost kind of decide to leave the group. Glenn has to convince, I forget who has to convince who, but finally they finally jet off in the other direction, the complete opposite direction of everybody else, and they stop on a bridge, and Glenn switches seats with Maggie. He wasn't in the passenger seat, and he finally tells her he loves her. They have a nice little moment there, and then next time we see them, they're actually heading back in the opposite direction. So at this point, everybody except, Patricia and Joey die. Andrea gets left behind, and everybody else is going in their disparate directions. Herschel
how quick, something that really kind of bothered me a little bit. T-Dog, he's just like, we're going east. We're going east. We're going east. I'm just like, really? You really think Lori and this other girl are going to let you abandon, take them away from their father and their husband? You really think that's going to happen, T-Dog?
There's something about T-Dog's character, and maybe I'm influenced by something I read on Twitter, but after meditating on it and thinking about it for a while, I really think there's something to this comment. There's something about T-Dog that we don't know. It's like he's pretending to be something he's really not, and I think next season we're going to really learn something about him. Like maybe he's part of another group of people, maybe he's part of the governor's people or something, because he was really strange in this episode. The whole thing about going east, and then the whole bit about well, shoot, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was the whole thing at the end where he's standing guard up top on that stone fence or whatever, and he's got some weird looks, like he's looking at Rick strangely, and there's just something going on with T-Dog. And I think it was Glenn Nazara on Twitter had said something about T-Dog's the apparent lack of T-Dog's involvement in the last few episodes has really been planned. There's something to it, and I really think that next season T-Dog's going to turn out to be something that we don't expect, or something that he's trying not to let on. There's something going on with him, and I think we're in for a big surprise with him.
Well, to jump back to earlier in the season, I mean, it's certainly consistent in his characterization that he would want to leave. Keep in mind when he was talking to Dale, and he said we should just have the RV and go, like leave these people behind. He seems perfectly okay with splitting them. But could that give more meaning to his use of the phrase "Governor called you home free" than we originally thought? That we just thought it was a little joke?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think there's really something to that. There are no throwaway lines like we discussed. What is that Chekhov's gun thing? I think this has something to do with it. I think he's part of another group, and he got split off. He's doing his best to survive. Any chance he gets that he sees, he's going to try to get back to that original group that he's with. I really think something's going on with him.
Well,
but he's, at the same time, he's forming relationships with these people. Lori says, "Let me out of the truck. You either let us turn around now or you let us out." And T-Dog's like, "Oh, I can't just, my conscience is getting the best of me. I can't just let these girls leave and walk away." So I think he's torn between allegiances with who he was really with and this new family he has.
Well, I think if they did that, it would actually make him a much more interesting character. And I'd much rather see them do that with him than just kind of leave him on the wayside and just have him as kind of this, half character that they've, made him into. So the fact that they would do something where he could be more prominent, I'm all for it. Even if it means making him a quote unquote bad guy.
Right. I totally agree. I mean, he's too good of an actor to leave just sitting out there blowing in the wind. And, at this point, honestly, if he had died last night, I don't know that I would miss him right now. So I'm glad he's around. I think we're going to get a little bit more development out of him. I think, if we do find out, if he does turn out to be a bad guy and he's more involved next season, then we see his betrayal, it's really going to hit us. Whereas if he had died last night, it would have been, oh, well, bye, Jimmy, bye, T-Dog, whatever.
If it turns out he is allied with the governor or whatever, I mean, that'd be something to go back on the DVD and be like, aha, they're foreshadowing themselves here. They're telegraphing what was going to happen later on, by throwing that line in there. Like you said, there aren't really any throwaway lines, so to speak.
Right. So Rick, Herschel, and Carl get back to the highway where they left the message for Sophia. They get there first, and they're kind of hanging out, dodging zombies as best they can, being as quiet as they can. Carl wants to go get his mom. Herschel tells Rick, you need to be there for your son. You don't know that your wife's alive, but you have one priority in your life now, and that is Applewaite and keeping him alive. Kind of reminded me a bit of the movie The Road, in spirit, at least not in content for sure, because that's much, much darker and bleaker. And then right when they're kind of thinking, well, maybe it is time for us, nobody else has come, maybe it's time to go, that's when the convoy of all the other cars comes in, and the group, Sans Andrea and Jimmy and Patricia, are reunited, and they head off on the road.
This is that great scene where before the rest of the group shows up, Rick and Herschel are talking, and Herschel says, "I can't pretend to know God's plan," but he promised the resurrection. I kind of thought the resurrection of the dead. I thought he had something a little different in mind. I thought that was one of the most brilliant lines I have heard in TV in a very long time.
Yeah, this was at the point where I really didn't know how it was going to go. I could have easily seen the season ending with the group separated. And I mean, obviously we saw Andrea separated, but I easily could have seen that they either split into 2 or 3 groups, and then that would maybe be a big plot point for season 3, or at least part of it is them kind of getting back together. And it would kind of like we talked about earlier, that they would take certain episodes and use it to spotlight characters instead of having this ensemble across the whole episode, and everybody kind of gets short shrifted. So that's one of the things I think they've done pretty well recently in the show is keep you guessing. Once they're willing to kind of throw it off, it makes you wonder if anything, everything's on the table.
And after what happens to the farm, they all have that crisis of conscience. So like, T-Dog wants to go east and he wants to break up from the group. Glenn and and Maggie, they have their moment where they're like, well, why don't we just get away from them? They all have the same, crisis of consciousness, whether they're going to stay together as a group or not. And yet they all end up in the same place. They all end up where they left, supplies for Sophia.
So at this point in the episode, we leave the main group and we find out what Andrea has been up to since she was abandoned. And she is running through the woods for her life with the sheriff's bag from all the way back in the pilot strung over her shoulder. She's got a handgun. She's picking up as many zombies as she can, but she's running and running for pretty much an entire day in both real life as they shot it, as we heard on Talking Dead,